Now, rumours and reports of a potential takeover at Bristol City have been doing the rounds on social media again, so I thought it'd be prime time to make a video about it. Turki Alalshikh is the potential man to take over Bristol City. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about him in this video. Now, this latest round of news stems from a journalist named Reluctant Nico on Twitter. Has a bit of a mixed record. I think there is legs to this story. There is genuine legs to this story, right? Steve Lansdown publicly said earlier in the year that Bristol City is for sale to the right buyer. And I think it's been widely reported in previous months that Turki Alalshikh is in the market for a football club and he wants to buy an English club, right? So we are for sale. He's in the market for a club. So I do think there are legs to this story. But how far we can take it into exactly how advanced things are, I think that's where there's a bit of a grey area. Reluctant Nico, he said more than the takeover is close. I believe he was suggesting that he's visited the HPC and had meetings and stuff. I'm not too sure how much has happened. I don't have any information on it. But I do think, regardless of whether you believe the report, there are genuine legs to the story. And it's not just September 2025 where this was reported. Back in June, there were talks of it as well. So The Sun reported, again, I don't know, it's Alan Dixon again, he got an article in The Sun saying that he was close to a takeover of Bristol City as well. So this story has been doing the rounds for a few months. In fact, I made a video back in, I think, July time about it as well. But what I wanted to do with this video was not just talk about the story, because it's not exactly news, but talk a little bit more about the man himself. So here's a little bit of a basic information about Turki. So he's well renowned in Saudi Arabia for the work he's done around boxing. He's involved, I'd say, with sort of the Saudi state, and he's very much involved with their area of entertainment, sports and cultural industries. You can see sort of the stuff there. He's done some things in football as well. So he has been the owner of Almeria, I don't know how to pronounce it, in Spain. So he's owned them. And he also, well, then they weren't called Pyramids FC when he acquired them, but he acquired a club in Egypt and transformed them into Pyramids FC. So he's had a couple of bits of experience in owning football clubs, but in quite short tenders. So he owned the Egyptian club from 2018 to 2019. He became the owner of Almeria in 2019 and sold them in 2025. I think both clubs were sold to other Saudi investors. So it's like he's almost the man to buy them, transform them quickly, and then sell them on to another Saudi investor. That seems to be the business model he follows with his football clubs. One thing I thought I would point out is, and it's kind of a comparison with the Lansdown family, I suppose, right? In terms of actual wealth, I believe Steve Lansdown's net worth is higher than Turki Alalshikh's. But I think being linked to the Saudi state, your personal net worth doesn't really mean much because you can just draw on the funds of the Saudi state. So I don't think we should pay too much attention to the fact he's worth less than Steve Lansdown. But one of the things I do think he brings that Steve or the Lansdown family might not is this guy is operating in like the highest echelons of society with the work that he does with boxing. I mean, the connections that he has through Saudi Arabia in boxing are huge. I mean, you got Dana White, Ronaldo, Tyson Fury, and I'm not saying that pictures with these celebrities mean much, but I think it's pretty obvious this guy's pretty well connected, and I think that would potentially mean bringing in potentially bigger companies to sponsor Bristol City. So not just using his own personal net worth to bring funds into the club, but I also think being able to market us to an almost higher echelon of society to bring sponsors in. That's just something that came to mind when I saw this guy was linked to the club. Now, obviously, he's really well known for what he's done in the sport of boxing, right? He's made I believe he made the Usyk Fury fight. He's doing Eubank Ben 2. And I think what he's trying to do with the sport of boxing is transform it into almost what the UFC is. Like the UFC is I know there are other divisions of mixed martial arts, but the UFC is the go-to sort of federation for mixed martial arts. And I think he's trying to build that with Saudi boxing to make them the absolute confirmed sort of federation. That's, I think, his plan. But that's boxing. I think he's done a good job at boxing, by the way. I think everyone probably knows that. But in terms of his key football involvements, we've got the two clubs, Pyramids FC and Almeria. So I thought I'd talk through what he did at those two clubs. So 2018, he bought an Egyptian club at the time called Asuti Sport. I might butcher that pronunciation. But then they got rebranded, interestingly, to Pyramids FC. He invested in the club heavily, bringing in some high-profile players, and achieved a top 3 finish in the Egyptian Premier League. But it was a short-lived venture. He sold his stake to an Emirati investor in 2019. That's kind of all there is to say about it. But interesting, he bought a football club, bought in a load of players, changed their name and their brand, and then sold it a year later. So that's just something to bear in mind. I don't think that would happen with Bristol City, but that's what he did. In Almeria, he bought it in August 2019. After taking over, major structural and sporting changes occurred, hiring new staff, executives, or whatever. Mohamed Al-Assi, I don't know who that is, as a general director. They upgraded facilities, changed management, pushing for promotion, which they succeeded in doing in the 21-22 season. However, upon getting promoted, the club struggled and they went back down in 2024. And then in 2025, he sold the club to some other Saudi investors. Another couple of bits of, footballing info, I suppose. He served as an honorary president of a Saudi club. What was that? Al Tawoon. And there's obviously been speculation about him buying an English club. ChatGPT, which is where this information comes from, suggests it's Southampton and Millwall, but obviously Bristol City is the subject of this channel. So that was like a brief overview of what he did at football clubs, but I've got a bit more info as to exactly how that came about, if that makes sense. So in terms of his achievements, obviously promotion to La Liga with Almeria is a big thing. He invested heavily in the club. So agreements over the stadium, taking responsibility for its operations. So I guess, is that stadium operations? Obviously Bristol City are not currently owners of Ashton Gate, but I'm not sure he would buy Ashton Gate, if that makes sense. Well, I don't know, I guess. And plans for youth development facilities. So he's transformed the training ground in looking to transform the stadium. He raised the profile of the club, which I think is, again, going back to me talking about sort of the echelons of society that he operates in. That's something he has the potential, I think, to do at Bristol City. And his ownership often involves ambitious financial backing. So in terms of getting promoted to the Premier League, you'd argue that that is probably better than what we're getting from the Lansdowns at the moment. Long term, is that better? I don't know. The sort of steady improvements we've made under the Lansdowne under a long period of time have been sustainable, obviously not led us to getting in the Premier League. This might be a faster approach with obviously a bit more risk. So yeah. Sporting fluctuations, the relegation of Almeria and struggles in performance, stability concerns and financial sustainability. Exactly what we said here. So we just said about the Lansdownes being sort of steady eddies that are slowly improving the club, whereas Turkey is one that will quickly improve it, but obviously a risk of sort of going down or regressing straight after. Just thought that would be interesting to point out. Now, I've been very careful about Turkey on social media and stuff so far, because obviously it's not a controversial thing to say that the Saudi Arabian state is perfectly clean and not involved in any controversies, right? Use the word controversy a lot there. And I've very much tried to separate the two, like Turkey as an individual human being as opposed to the Saudi state, right? Being part of Saudi Arabia does not necessarily make you a bad person. And I'll really try to separate the individual from the Saudi state. But you cannot, when you do some research on this guy, you cannot ignore some of the controversies that he has been involved in. So I've spoken there about sporting prowess and success and what he would bring to the football club, purely like factually based on what has happened. And this is probably the more negative side of things. I'm not going to shy away from talking about it, even though some of these things say he is, those that criticize him get punished, basically. So is what it is. I mean, it's all out there on the internet to read for yourself. But we've got, unfortunately, quite a lot of things that are associated with, the state that he belongs to. Human rights violations. I'm not going to, and there might be some buzzwords on this that I can't necessarily say on a YouTube video and get myself demonetized. So what I'm going to do is leave it on there, but criminal sentencing for criticism of him. There are things like detentions, enforced disappearances, stuff like that happening in Saudi Arabia. These are all on Wikipedia and reported by The Athletic. So it wouldn't take too. I'll try and leave some links in the description to all of it, and you can check it out on The Athletic. But for a sporting side of things, I think it's clear what he will bring, but it's not without its controversies and negative sides. And I thought, my job with this video is to bring both of those to you. And I'll leave you with this in the comments, right? This man I think there's genuine legs to him taking over at Bristol City, right? And something that Steve Lansdowne said in his, I think he did an interview back in April about a potential takeover at Bristol City, right? He said he is willing to sell the club to the correct buyer. And I genuinely think fan opinion is going to sway his view on who the correct buyer at the football club is. I do not think money is an issue. Whatever Steve Lansdown's asking price for Bristol City is, a man that's backed by the Saudi state will be able to afford it. I don't think that's a problem. The issue is he is he a proper and fit owner for Bristol City? And I do think, us as fans have a real view in that. So let me know in the comments yourself what you think of it, and be active on social media too, because if this story really does have legs, I think we as fans have a say in it happening, right? We can make a bit of noise if you don't like it, or likewise, if you do like it and think it's a good thing, then you can make a bit of noise about that as well. For me, not sure. I don't think this sits well in the city of Bristol. This city in the most leans politically left, right? If this happens, I don't think it will be received very well by the city. Not just Bristol City fans, but the city as a whole. I don't know how that will sit. That's one thing that concerns me. And for me, if any of these controversies are true, say what you like about the Lansdown family and what they've done at the football club. They may have made some mistakes. They've done nothing of the sort of this, right? They are, I think, perfectly decent human beings, right? If any of this is true, I don't want this man owning my football club. All right, well, that's the end of the video. That was a bit of a deep... I'm recording this before work on Tuesday morning, so that was a bit deep to start the day. But hopefully you enjoyed it and found it useful. Tried to cover both sides of the story there. He's had success at football clubs, but then they've regressed. Obviously, those controversies as well. I'm very careful to avoid some buzzwords on this channel because I don't really know how YouTube responds to that kind of chat. And I don't want to bring politics into this channel, but I think it's important to talk about it, right? If you enjoyed it, please leave me a like rating. Let me know what you think in the comments, whether you'd be happy for him to take over. And yeah, that's everything. If you enjoyed the video, want to see more from me, Robin's Nest, subscribe to it here on your screen. And that's everything. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.